Hello, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another session of Function Points webinar where we're going to talk a little bit about our new feature for importing external expenses via CSV files. So we're very excited to show you kind of what this feature can do for you. It is now 10 a.m. Pacific time, but I see quite a few stragglers just coming in. So we'll give them another maybe 30 seconds to a minute here to let the stragglers come. But otherwise, we'll get started shortly after that. All right. I think that was about 30 seconds to a minute there. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking the time and attending the webinar today. My name is Jimmy Wu. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Function Point. And I also have my partner in crime, Sophia Wilson, who's joining us as well. If this is the first time you're using GoToWebinar, I just want to let you know that you can ask questions during the webinar at any given point. And in your GoToWebinar control panel, there is a question section. So if you have any questions throughout, just feel free to punch that in, and my colleague Sophia Wilson will try to answer as many of them as possible throughout. But hopefully you can all see my screen. Let's get started here. Right. Okay, so for today's webinar, what we're going to go through is the expense CSV import, what it is, and when can you use this. Then we'll have a live demonstration of how to actually use this feature inside Function Point, and then also a few things you can watch for and recommendations from myself. When I was the project manager doing a lot of these data imports, what I typically went through and some of the hard lessons I learned myself as well. Okay. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay. So first off, what is CSV expense import? So while it's not an integration, however, with the CSV expense import, it's going to now allow you, instead of entering external expenses inside Function Point one by one, you're going to have the ability to bulk import via an Excel spreadsheet. So whether it's so a lot of the use case scenarios might be that if you use an external expense management system like Expensify or Bill.com or SAP Concur, or another common one that people want to bulk import are credit card expenses from your Visa or from your QuickBooks. So in this case, instead of trying to enter, 50, 100 line items from these systems and do a double entry, what you can, with the CSV expense import, you can now just quickly export them from your expense system and then import them into Function Point so that you can bill these expenses back to your customer or properly track your job costing. Okay. So let's take a look at a live demo of how this is going to work. So we'll go through a few things. So we'll first off talk about the permissions on who actually has access to this, how you can download the template, filling in the template and getting that, and we'll actually, I'm going to use Expensify as a sample example here for today's purposes. And then we'll talk about how to, once you finish the import, how do you review it to make sure that it is correct. Okay. So let's jump into the Function Point system. So this is my Function Point system. Hopefully this is familiar stuff for everyone. So first off, the permission setting is automatically turned off for all the users currently. Okay. So what you would want to do is make sure you go into your staff permissions, which is just under the admin section, and hopefully you will have permissions to adjust people's settings there. If not, if you do not see the option to adjust people's permission, just contact your system administrator and they should be able to help you out. But overall, where you want to go is, there is a new permission toggle. Under the permission set, there's a new permissions toggle under expenses. You'll see a new line called expense import. So you will want to make sure that this is checked off. And once this is checked off and saved, under the expense section, you'll now see a new area called import expenses. So when you click, so one suggestion I'd like to make is that just like if you have QuickBooks integration, it's very similar in terms of the permission setting. You do not want to give this to everyone. You definitely want to make sure you have the control over this, as this may or may not tie into your QuickBooks afterwards as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we now do the import.
Hey, Jimmy.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt real quick. So there's been a couple of questions that have come in just around this permission. And I just wanted to let everyone know that this permission is not going to be set by default. Well, it will, but it will be set to not allow you to have it. Just in case anyone is a little bit worried that some of their end users are just automatically going to be able to access this new feature, that is not the case. You will need to go in and allow them to do it. Even those of you that are FP Primes or administrators at this time, you will need to go in and update your own permissions as well. So I just kind of wanted to throw that in there because we've had a few people that are a little bit worried on the question side of things regarding it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that. Okay, so once you have permissions, this is going to be the screen where you would be able to see and do the actual import. There is always a help doc link that you can look at afterwards, but let's go ahead and download the actual template. So once I download the CSV template, there will be a number of fields. So let's go ahead and put that out. Okay, and let me just zoom in so you can see. All right. So there are quite a few columns here. Now keep in mind the required fields have an asterisk beside it. Okay. And you'll also see there are some accounting related fields such as payable accounts or the office you want to relate it to. But really the three key fields is suppliers that you want, the job, and the expense type. For the supplier, they do need to be an exact match, okay, with function points, the suppliers or vendors you have already inside function point. The job, I personally recommend that you put the job number, but if you put the job name, that the system will take that as well or both together. But job number to me is always the most unique ID, so that's what I typically recommend. Expense type. So this is an interesting part. So some of you may have your expense type names inside QuickBooks or inside function point or whichever expense software you might use may be different compared to what you have inside function point. If that is the case, the system is going to be looking for an exact match. So you want to make sure that the expense type name inside whichever expense system you have right now does match with function point, okay? So that the import goes in smoothly. And I'll show you an example of a scenario where it is an exact match versus not an exact match. So you can see how the system takes in the two different rates, how the system accepts or rejects the import. Then there are other fields that may or may not be important to you. So obviously the quantity and rate will be important, but there are column L and M in regards to build versus markup. So with build, in the scenario where you do want to build this expense back to the customer, you would put a 0 or 1 if you don't want to bill it back. And then markup percentage, if you are billing back, you can also put a markup percentage that you deem fit as well. Otherwise, the system will automatically do default that to 0. And manually export it. So a lot of people may ask, okay, if I am importing my credit card expenses from QuickBooks, it's already in the inside the system. So why I do want to make sure I don't export that again into QuickBooks. So the system, when you finish the import, it's going to automatically have that as already exported to manually exported to QuickBooks. So you don't have to worry about it going in again. So let's go into, so I've set up a sample Expensify account here.
Sorry,
So
Jimmy.
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I had another quick question come in about that manually exported, and maybe I'm just also looking for a little bit more clarity on that. So that is only in the case where we're bringing the import in from QuickBooks itself, right? So if we're going through the workflow of importing based off of, say, Concur or Expensify, we still want to make sure that we what would the status that we would leave there so that we can make sure that it does go to QuickBooks when we do our sync?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know what, that the scenario may be different for each for everyone. So in the scenario such as if you're using Expensify or Concur, if you already have Expensify and Concur integrated with your QuickBooks system and that's working well for you, no problem. Then you want to just you can leave this blank so that the system doesn't export it again from function point to QuickBooks. However, if your expense management system does not integrate with QuickBooks, or you then what you want to do is make sure that this is not marked as manual, this is not left blank, so that the system can actually, you can then export it from function point into QuickBooks afterwards. A couple other things to watch out for though, is that also means you would want your payable account to be mapped appropriately as well. My understanding is that Expensify and Concur, SAP Concur does have an integration with QuickBooks, and I'm not 100% sure around Bill.com. So that may be something you will want to check with your expense vendor, software vendor directly. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it does.
Any other
Thank
questions?
You know what? I think I've been able to answer the majority of them as they come through. Those are just ones that I felt like clarification on the call was great. Thanks.
Okay, great. So just want to let everyone know, again, we will record all of our webinars and we will share this afterwards, and so that they're always accessible, and you can also share it with your colleagues as well. All right, so let's go ahead. I've set up a sample Expensify account, and I've entered 3 different expenses here. One with Shopify, one bought digital printing, and Google. And one is $500, $100, and $100 each, with the expense type materials, travel, and advertising. I've also had a custom field inside Expensify where I'm putting in the job number as well. So this is going to be important. As you have people enter your expenses, hopefully they're already putting in some sort of a number or name relating to that job as well, so you can quickly import that into function point afterwards. I've also created a customized export report that is mapped very similar to the function point import workbook. So I'm going to go ahead and export that. So in here, you can see in this Excel sheet that I've exported from Expensify, the columns I have are really customized so that all I need to do is simply copy and then paste it directly into my function point import workbook. Okay, so I know that Concur and Expensify both have capabilities for custom reporting like this, and QuickBooks Online has some capabilities around this as well. So that's something you may want to explore. But in this case, because I've customized it, I really don't need to make any further adjustments as well. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and save this external expense template, and then go back, and then go ahead and import it into function point. So now that I have the spreadsheet created, the import workbook filled out, I'm going to go ahead and go ahead and upload. Now, when you upload, there are a couple things that's going to happen. First off, the system is going to right away let you know how many the line line items were successfully imported. So I have 3 separate line items, but only 1 out of the 3 has been imported successfully. The others have not. So the system will then spit out a separate spreadsheet, which is going to tell you exactly what line items were not imported successfully and what the error messages were. So really quickly, in this result, I can see that there are these 2 line items that didn't fill in correctly with Shopify and Google. And it's going to tell you exactly what went wrong as well. So in the error message here, and let me wrap the text so that people can read it. Okay, so we had quite a bit of errors in the first line. So the first line, it actually said, did not match any supplier, vendor, company name. So again, earlier we talked about how the company, supplier, and vendor name does need to be an exact match. So if your system, function point system is integrated with QuickBooks, for instance, this shouldn't be an issue for you. If you do have another system, you may need to double check that. And the second main error we had was that the job number did not match anyone in the system. And then last but not least, materials is not the same type of expense. It's not a external expense type that exists in the function point system. Okay, so which relates to the service group error message as well. So that is important. So earlier I mentioned that the expense type that you export from your expense management tool must also have an exact match with function point system. Okay. So, but this will allow you to quickly go ahead and make any changes as you see fit. So maybe I know this is also for 30179, and maybe this was printing, and I'm just gonna fall. So you can quickly make changes associated to that. So now by doing that, I can now go back and re-upload my corrected spreadsheet. And now the remaining 2 have been successfully imported. So after importing, the biggest thing is you always want to check the results. So there are a couple of ways. I know in this case, for all 3 line items, I've imported into job 30179 for corporate website. So how this is going to go into your system is taking a look at specification and concept service group here. Under external expenses, I now have 3 line items. You're going to notice the travel line item now has a new expense that we just imported in for June 16th with a new PO ID number 55. And this is imported by myself, the supplier, and the rate of $100. And I didn't put any markup percentage, so that's why the billable value is still at 100. So this, if the expense type is already budgeted in your job, then it will map to that appropriate expense type that you've budgeted for, which we budgeted $1,200 here. However, we did not budget for printing and freelancer. So this was $0 and actually was not part of the allocated expenses into the job. So the system actually will automatically recognize that and actually create those line items and associate the cost for you.
I actually have a quick question on that, Jimmy, because obviously the workflow of the system, it does allow you to apply external expenses against a job at any time. You don't have to estimate for it, unlike the internal services. So how did the system decide where to put printing and freelancer, even though we hadn't estimated for it? Because normally you would input your external expense and you could actually apply it to any of the service groups living on there, but we have 2 on this job. Do you know if there's that was just a question on how the system is thinking about that?
Yeah, great question. So in the scenario where when you do the import, if you actually know which service group you want it to allocate to, then you can go ahead and fill this column O inside the import workbook. However, in the case that you don't know and it doesn't really matter to you, then the system, if it's blank, will automatically create it under first service group within the job.
Okay, great. That's awesome.
Any other questions? I know I went through a lot there. Before I go through a second method of looking at the import results.
I don't think so. There were a few questions just around the quantity and rate, which of course is available in the spreadsheet itself if you're wanting to break it out. So just recognizing that. Obviously, Jimmy just put in a quantity of 1 with a rate of 500. So that is how that's spit out there. But if you are, working with a freelancer and say, that they've worked X number of hours at a specific dollar rate, you can still also have that detail leveled in the spreadsheet, which would import for you. So that was just another item someone was asking about.
Awesome. And the other part is also if you left the quantity blank and only put a flat rate because it's just a 60 or a fixed cost, then the system will just default it to 1 automatically. All right. Now another way I usually check, especially when you're importing 50, 100 line items all at once, is I would go into an external expense find and look for all expenses that were created today. Okay. By doing that, I'm going to quickly be able to find all the items that I've imported, and you'll also see in the PO number is going to be sorted in the proper numerical. So we started with 55 and ended with 57. And notice that I'm not exporting this to QuickBooks because it's already marked as manually exported. So that's overall how you would be able to quickly enter the expenses into the system. Now, I know that was a lot to go through. So once again, inside the actual import expense page, there is a link to a help document, which is going to take you through step by step of the process that I just described as well. Furthermore, for each of the columns, it does have a description of what each of the columns how it maps in detail. Okay. And what happens if you leave it blank or such. So I would definitely highly recommend you review this section first, especially for the fields that would apply to you. All right. Before we get into some best practices, so let's talk about some other things to keep in mind. So we talked about the vendor name needing to be an exact match. So this is, from my experience, another key thing is to know how many lines you export and import. Okay. You're going to usually have a general sense once you export the report from the expense management system, whether it's 100 line items or 1,000 line items. There are times, many times when I did it, I've accidentally hit copy twice, and then it doubled the amount of imports that I have. So you definitely want to double check that, as this is not reversible. So if you do make a mistake, it is quite a manual process to reverse it afterwards, as most export imports. So make sure you double check how many lines. Double check your results. So I always double check my results. One of the things is this is going to tie into probably your billing afterwards back to the customer, or any chargebacks you might have, or your job costing and reporting. So make sure you double check your results that they are being allocated to the right jobs at a quick glance. If you have like 500 line items, I usually do a spot check of maybe 10 of them, okay, which will kind of give you a quick view of whether you did it correctly or not. Last but not least, as with all imports, minimize the symbols. So pound, exclamation mark, @ symbols. Those are all things that, with regardless whichever system it is, they can be difficult for the computers to read. So I highly recommend that you minimize the number of symbols you have. Now, some recommendations that I've always found helpful is, one, make sure your source report is as close to the import as possible. So in my example earlier with Expensify, I customized the report, so all I needed to do is copy and paste it in. Not all system is going to let you customize it to that extent, but it's something, the closer you get, the better it is. Sometimes it may need 2 different reports, but that's okay. That's where utilizing a formula called VLOOKUP inside Excel is very, very useful to consolidate 2 different spreadsheets. If you're not familiar with VLOOKUP, that, my friend, is going to save you so many hours moving forward, regardless what you use, if you manipulate data a lot. That is my favorite formula in Excel. So if you're not aware, Google it. It's mind-boggling. I love it.
I will also just say, when Jimmy taught me VLOOKUP, it changed my life. I'm just throwing it out there for everyone in there.
Last but not least, one important workflow you might want to consider moving forward is in your expense management tool to consider where you want to enter the job number. Okay. If you have a tool like Expensify, people are submitting their travel expenses or personal expenses, start reinforcing that they tell you what job or at least what client it is associated with. So that way, when you spit out the actual export and try to import it into function point afterwards, it's going to save you a lot more manual work afterwards. So that's all I had. So I wanted to see if, that was shorter than the previous webinar. So I wanted to see if there were any questions, and hopefully those tips were helpful for people. Any questions? Give everyone your name.
Lots of great questions, and I think I've been able to tackle the majority of them. Something that I just really want to sort of just kind of amplify on this is that, this is like, the goal of this is to actually save everyone a lot of time. Over the years, we've received a lot of feedback from our customers that can be quite cumbersome to input every single expense one by one. So I'm really excited for everyone to get their hands on it and really try to start importing and seeing what kind of time we can cut down for people. So, as everyone is testing this out for some of the first times, please do reach out to the success team. We're here to be a resource for you and help however we can. If you receive error messages, please reach out to our support team, because, this is new and we're excited about it, but obviously if you break it, please let us know so we can fix it. So yeah, that's just really something I wanted to just quickly throw out there. Jimmy, we're really looking for efficiencies to help our customers do what they do best, and that's be creative, right?
Yeah, that's right. I will make a couple of one last suggestion before you start using it, is to do a test run. Okay. With any import, I always like to do a test run with maybe just 2 or 3 different expense records. That is very important to help you get used to it, get used to the import template, making sure the fields are how the system taken all the fields and the results. So please make sure you don't try to import 100 line items right off the bat. Start with 2 or 3, and once you get more comfortable, then actually do the full batch. I'm also seeing a few questions in regards to workflow. So for workflow for importing expenses, every agencies might be a little different. The way I foresee a few different workflow is that some people, if you have, once again, your expense management software, whether it's Expensify or Concur or whichever one it is, if that's already integrated with QuickBooks, you can just go ahead and have those expenses imported into function point without exporting into QuickBooks again, because you don't want the double accounting. If your expense management tool does not have capability to integrate with your QuickBooks system, then that would be a great opportunity for you to just bulk import it into function point, and then through function point, export it into QuickBooks. Okay. So those are the 2 most, I guess, the high level at a quick glance of what that workflow would look like. If you feel your scenarios are more unique than that, then, like Sophia said, feel free to reach out to our success team, and we'll explore that together and see how we can help each other out.
Okay, great. There's still a few more questions coming in, but I think most of these we could probably handle offline, Jimmy. So everyone, if I wasn't able to get to your questions today, don't worry, we will be doing a follow-up to make sure that we are in touch to answer all of these. And again, you know, if in the middle of the night tonight you realize you had a question you forgot to ask, feel free to shoot an email to our success team at success@functionpoint.com, and we'll do our best to help you.
Okay, and just want to let everyone know if this feature is live. So if you happen to, if you don't see it, just make sure you turn it on in your permission setting. And once again, we will be sharing this webinar recording to everyone. So you will see within 24 hours, you will see an email coming through with the recording as well. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed this session, and we look forward to and stay tuned for our next webinar session.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jimmy. It's always fun to tag team these with you.
Yeah, thanks, Sophia.
Okay.